Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something absolutely crucial, literally the foundation of human existence. We're talking about how the landscape actually shapes our culture. Whether we're looking at the physical stuff, the material culture, like traditional housing and agricultural tools, or diving into non-material culture, like our deeply held beliefs and social norms, we really have to start with our relationship to the Earth itself. It's the ultimate starting point.
So that brings us to a massive, almost Socratic question. How is our culture fundamentally shaped? Think about it for a second. When you look at the spatial standardization of modern popular culture, how everywhere kind of starts looking the same, and contrast that with the incredibly localized, unique traits of traditional folk culture, you really have to wonder, did we invent all these distinct diets, clothing styles, and architectures just purely out of human ingenuity, or is there this invisible physical hand guiding our development behind the scenes?
Well, for a really long time in academic history, the biophysical environment definitely wasn't seen as just some passive stage where human life simply played out. No way. The mountains, the rivers, the soil, the rainfall, they were viewed as the absolute foundation. People saw the environment as the absolute master architect of human destiny, literally drawing the hard boundaries of what humanity could achieve.
And that brings us to a super foundational and historically pretty controversial concept called environmental determinism. Basically, it's the belief that the physical environment exclusively shapes humans, our actions, and our thoughts. I really want that word exclusively to sink in here. Under this framework, human agency and choice, they take a total backseat. The idea was that who you are, how you think, and exactly what your culture looks like is entirely predetermined by where you just happen to be born.
Now, to really grasp the weight of this idea, we've got to anchor ourselves back in the first quarter of the 20th century. It was a time of incredibly rapid modernization, and geographers were honestly desperate to find universal laws that could explain all the vast cultural differences across the globe. And surprisingly, for decades, this really strict, almost fatalistic geographic theory was the unquestioned lens through which the Western world understood human development.
Okay, let's break down the tenets of this theory, because they are strict and pretty unforgiving. The logic goes like this. If culture is shaped entirely by the biophysical environment, then the physical landscape provides the absolute dominant force dictating our actions. Nature doesn't just give us a gentle nudge in a certain direction. It lays down the tracks, and humanity is basically just the train forced to follow them, with no steering wheel.
Honestly, perhaps the most striking encapsulation of this whole era is this specific quote: "Humans were clay to be molded by nature." Just think about that for a second. Clay is completely passive, right? It has absolutely no will of its own. In the strict framework of environmental determinism, nature is the sculptor, and our languages, our diets, our social structures, the whole shebang, are just the hardened, inevitable result of that molding process.
So, if you were to subscribe to this early theory, you're essentially accepting a really profound level of species helplessness. You're saying your community's cultural achievements are just the inescapable outcome of your local climate. And, this completely ignores what we now call possibilitism. Possibilitism is our modern understanding that, yes, the environment definitely sets limitations for sure, but human ingenuity ultimately chooses the path. But back then, possibilitism wasn't even in the picture.
The theory actually went to some pretty stark extremes, too. It even categorized certain climates as having a so-called defect. So freezing or extremely arid zones weren't just seen as, challenging places to live. They were labeled as fundamentally flawed for human progress. It's a wildly rigid, almost comical way of viewing the planet today. It essentially claims that geography alone dictates human migration and literally forces us to just avoid certain areas entirely.
Which leaves us with a pretty profound question to wrap things up. If early geographers truly believed nature molded our traditional folk cultures like clay, are we still bound by those rules today? I mean, as global popular culture rapidly spreads and our modern technology allows us to totally defy our local climates, which is a massive testament to possibilism, by the way, does nature still hold all the cards? Or have humans finally become the sculptors? Something to chew on. Keep questioning the world around you, and we'll catch you next time.